Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. For those of you who are new to ORT, we are an organization that supports entrepreneurs in the Jewish community through mentorship, networking, and training. If you would like to know more, please contact Brenna or me. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from Lance Katz. Lance is an actuary with extensive experience in structured finance and investment management. For the last 10 years, he has served as the CEO of SACAP, the South African College of Applied Psychology. He is a devoted community leader and was recently appointed as the chairperson of the UJC Cape Town. Lance has been involved with ORT for many years as a mentor. Thank you for your ongoing support and being part of the ORT family. Lance will encourage you to interact tonight. Please unmute yourself at the appropriate time if you would like to participate. Feel free to post comments and questions in the chat box, and Brenna will address them at the end in the Q&A. And remember to please keep your microphones on mute. Thank you, Lance, for giving of your time and sharing your message with us. Over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. And welcome, everybody. It's really wonderful to have this opportunity to engage with all of you and also to be part of ORT's program. They do unbelievable work. And as Lisa said, I've had the pleasure of being involved with ORT in some of their mentorship program, and they do fantastic work. So I think this is a wonderful initiative of theirs. Which started primarily during times of COVID, and it really is my pleasure to be able to present to all of you. Let me start by saying that the topic is fairly audacious. You know, it takes some chutzpah to put out a topic like 12 Jewish rules for business, as if somehow, you know, tonight you are attending a talk by the Oracle, who has sort of worked it all out and who can tell you what the 12 secrets of success are. So let me say right up front that you know, I don't have all the answers at all, and you know, I really think it's important to just acknowledge that there's a great deal unknown about success. So many people think that they know the secrets of success and based on their own experiences, but they may well have been very fortunate, and the very things that maybe resulted in success may have been actually the wrong things, and they were just lucky, and maybe the things that they attribute to their failures were in fact very good things, but they were just unfortunate. So I just want to put out there that I don't claim by any stretch of the imagination to have all the answers, but what I am going to be doing tonight is just sharing a few of my thoughts and reflections on this topic, and also hopefully getting some input from all of you, because everybody on this talk has had their own experiences of life, their own reflections on success, on resilience, on staying motivated, on dealing with tough times, especially over the last year where things have been particularly tough on so many fronts. I'm sure everybody on this talk tonight has had their own personal reflections and experiences, and could equally be giving this talk to the rest of us tonight. So I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you along the way, and just to sharing some of my reflections. The other thing to point out is that I've specifically tried to focus on Jewish elements, albeit that I think some of the concepts are generic. In other words, they're not specifically Jewish, but you'll see later on in the talk, I've tried to find sources in Jewish texts, in the liturgy, in Jewish experience, in Jewish culture, which somehow inform some of the ideas that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I think it's a useful lens through which to experience life and observe life, is through our own, not only human experience, but through our own particular Jewish experience and Jewish lens. And I've tried to do that tonight. What I'm not going to be talking about is Jewish ethics. I'm not an expert in Jewish business ethics, much of my talk is in fact drawn on Avot, ethics of the fathers, but it's not specifically a talk about Jewish business ethics, and there are much more qualified professionals and scholars that would be much better positioned to talk about Jewish business ethics. What I've really tried to reflect on is some of the meta ideas and themes that can help us be more successful in our lives. And by success, I don't necessarily mean the accumulation of riches. It may well be just success in feeling that one is thriving, feeling that one is on top of life, feeling that one is motivated or living with a sense of purpose, feeling a sense of resilience, feeling a sense of connectedness and a place in the world. So success is not necessarily defined by the accumulation of bags of money, in our private vaults or in our bank account or in our share portfolios. Success is defined in many different ways, and I've tried to use this broader definition of success in this talk tonight. So before I start, I'd like to ask each of you, if you've got a pen and paper handy, to spend the next minute just putting down a few thoughts. If you can get as many as 12 in a minute, that's great. If you can get 30, that's even better. But if you can only get one, that's also fine. 12 things, 12 ideas, try and keep each idea to 1 or 2 words. 12 ideas that you think from your experience leads to success. And you don't necessarily have to think Jewishly, although many on the call tonight, if not the vast majority, are Jewish. But you don't have to specifically think through a Jewish lens. From your own experience, from your own reflections on life, 12 ideas, if you can get to 12, or 1 or 2, that you think are critical ingredients of success. And we'll be drawing on some of that later. And as I work through my talk, you can also use that as an opportunity to think about your points in relation to some of those that I came up with as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to do that, and take a pen and paper and just write down your own ideas and thoughts. Okay, so if you didn't manage to complete the exercise, or if you still have thoughts that you sort of trying to work through in your mind and put down, feel free to continue during the course of the discussion tonight to add to your list. And there are no right or wrong answers here. And I think that's the point. Note that the topic to the talk is not the 12 business rules. So it's not like there are 12 and these are them. These are just 12, but there are many. And so there are no right or wrong answers. I guess I should also make one final disclaimer, and that is Lisa mentioned at the beginning of the talk that I've just been appointed as the chairperson of the UJC. And so I should just say that I'm not doing this talk in that capacity. However, if you really do enjoy the talk and you feel therefore very positively about the UJC, you should give generously to it. And if the talk is terrible, you should really feel very sorry for the UJC, and you should give very generously to it. So that's my little plug for the UJC tonight, but that'll be the last time I mention that specifically. Okay, let's get going. And what I've tried to do tonight is I've put together a little bit of a framework. Some of the slides are a little bit dense, And I don't expect you to read all the content of every slide and to try and absorb everything. A lot of the density in the slides is for my own purpose, to be able to sort of remind myself of the ideas or thoughts or quotes Jewishly that I want to raise. But what I've tried to do here is present a bit of a framework. So I'm going to start with a quote from the very beginning of Per Kavot, Ethics of the Fathers. And I think it's the second Mishnah, the second quote in the very first chapter of Per Kavot. And it says, Shimon the righteous was among the survivors of the Great Assembly. And he used to say that the world depends on three things: on Torah study, on the service of God, and on kind deeds. Now, this is a very, very big statement. We're talking about the whole world. And what Shimon the righteous is saying is that the whole world, the functioning of the world, the survival of the world, and for purposes of tonight's talk, the success of the world, the success of everything, the sustainability of it all, comes down to these three things. Okay, now I do appreciate that, not everyone on this talk is religious or necessarily coming from a Jewish perspective. And what I'm going to share with you next is a great sage's perspective on these three elements. What is meant by Torah study in a more generic sense? What's meant by service of God? And what's meant by kind deeds? Okay. So what the Maharal says, and he was a great sort of medieval rabbi from Europe, and he had a particular take on Per Kavot. In fact, he did a whole commentary on the whole of Per Kavot, and it's a very, very famous commentary. And what he identifies is that these three elements, these three pillars upon which the whole world rests, right? The survival of humankind, the survival of all living species depends, is actually about three different types of relationships. There are our interpersonal relationships, there is our relationship to ourself, and there is, let's call it, our relationship to God, or if God is a problem, for purposes of this discussion, let's talk about it as our relationship to the universe, our relationship to the metaphysical, our relationship to things that maybe are beyond our understanding or conceptualization, but somehow reflect our overall way of being in the world, our way of understanding our existence and interpreting our meaning and our place in the world. So these are three distinct elements, three distinct relationships: relationships with others, with other human beings, man to man, or woman to woman, or man to woman, relationship to self, and then the metaphysical, okay? And we can kind of see now how these three pillars fit those three relationships, right? Because kind deeds, of course, is very much around our connection to our fellow human being. Torah, the study of Torah, or the study of anything, the study of wisdom, the study of any subject matter, a great deal of that is around self-development, self-improvement, personal growth, and working on oneself, bettering oneself, raising oneself to a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of awareness, a higher level of skill or knowledge or understanding. And then, of course, we have this relationship to everything outside of ourselves, other than our human connections, which fall in the interpersonal space, which is to the metaphysical, the broader universe and beyond, which we don't always understand, but somehow we do have a perception that we are part of this. So what I've done in this framework is come up with 12 elements, and I've tried to put 4 elements in each of these 3 categories, and then I'm going to talk to them in terms of their Jewish connection and finding some sources, and then I'd love to hear from you guys what some of your ideas and thoughts were as well. So this is sort of the framework that we're going to be working through tonight and that I'm going to be using. Okay, so let's talk about interpersonal relationships. And in this particular domain, or this pillar of success or, holding up the world, sustaining the world, I would identify 4 key elements that are really critical to successful interpersonal relationships, and then leveraging those interpersonal relationships for life success. The first one is one's reputation. And we'll hear later some sources from Per Katz and others which speak to the importance of reputation. But I think everybody on this call tonight understands that there is absolutely nothing more important than your good name. And it doesn't matter how successful you are as an individual in other areas of your life. If you have a damaged reputation, it can really destroy your long-term success, and certainly your feeling of being a successful person. And unfortunately, we know of many people who have maybe attained great wealth or achieved sporting success or other types of success, and then thrown away their good name and their reputation, often for very foolish reasons, often on a whim, often a moment of weakness. And we know from observing this how damaging that can be to the individual. So your personal brand, your reputation, I would say, is the #1 starting point for success. If you understand that you as an individual have a brand, just like any company has a brand and wouldn't want to tarnish that brand, you as an individual have a brand, and your reputation is absolutely sacrosanct, then you'll really make sure that you guard and nurture your reputation. And particularly in times like we're in at the moment, a good friend of mine and a business colleague that I worked with for many, many years once said, you can only tell the color of the tea when it's in hot water. And I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful statement, because it's so true. It's easy to put on a show of being a particular kind of person when times are good, when things are going well. When relationships are easy, when there's no conflict. But what happens when things really hot up? What happens when there's difficulty, or when there are challenges, or when relationships are in tension? What sort of colors does one show? And I think this issue of reputation is really, really so important to success. And I want to use the example of our community as a great example of this principle, is just how wonderfully our community has risen to the challenges of COVID. And when I talk about our community, I don't only mean our organizations, I talk about individuals in our community. Each and every single person in our community has really shown their true colors in times of difficulty. We've been the tea bag, the proverbial tea bag in hot tea, and we've shown some very, very amazing and beautiful flavors and aromas and color. And that holds true for every single person in our community and every single community organization. So that's a great example of really showing our true colors, showing the reputation, particularly in times of difficulty. The next one is networks, right? It's all well and good to talk about our personal brand, but what's equally important, or I would say at the next level of importance, is our networks. The people we know, the people that know us, and networks are an incredibly important part of success. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think, if you didn't identify it as one of your items when you were drawing up your list, I think you would agree in reflecting on success. And a key element of success is that none of us are an island on our own, and that as individuals, we can achieve a great deal, but we can achieve so much more when we work collaboratively with others, when we have access to resources, skills, expertise, and insights beyond our own narrow perspectives, our own narrow set of skills or experiences. And that when we can somehow tap into those networks, we can leverage a far greater power. As God says in the book of Bereshit, he said, it's not good that man should live alone. It's not good that man should be alone. And of course, that's in relation to the story of Adam and Eve, but it applies actually to life in general. It's not good that we should be an island. And our networks come to a great deal of importance when we are looking to expand our influence, expand our success, and deal with some of the challenges that come our way. You know, networks can be particularly powerful in times of challenge. And I think all of us, as much as we've been isolated sometimes at home, have found that by reaching out to those networks, reaching out to those relationships, we have somehow managed to be more resilient in these difficult times. The third one, which for me, I think has been life-changing, particularly, I would say, in the last 10 or 15 years, has been the introduction of mentors. And I think this is something ORT naturally, instinctively understands, and that's why mentorship is such a key part of what ORT does, is because they realize that a mentor can be a decisive factor for someone who is looking to achieve success. It doesn't matter at what level they are. There might be someone just entering into the business world or just entering into adulthood, or it might be someone who's a very experienced business person or a very experienced leader. And nonetheless, the value of mentorship at various life stages can be such a decisive factor. For me personally, I only really discovered the value of mentors in the last 10, 15 years. When you're young and you're sort of cocky in your 20s, you think you know everything. And, you think that, that old guys know very little, or they have very little to offer because, their ideas, their experiences are in the past. But I think as one matures and as one grows, one realizes that actually there's a great deal of wisdom that lies outside of oneself, and that gray hair has a great deal of value. And in the last 10, 15 years, I've personally made for myself 2 or 3 very, very close mentors that have been absolutely decisive in some of the decisions that I've made along the way, and that have really led to great blessing and success. And then the fourth element of this is kindness itself. Now, remember, this interpersonal relationships thing was itself defined by the pillar of acts of kindness. But I think kindness and acts of kindness is an element in itself. And we'll talk a little bit more why this is the case. But I want you to reflect on one idea. We often see successful people being very generous. And a great example of this is the late Eric Sampson of blessed memory, who was an incredibly successful individual, but also known for his great philanthropy, his great generosity. And in fact, there was a beautiful tribute to him at the end of the Shloshim after his passing. And it was quite remarkable. I mean, I knew a lot about Eric and I knew about his generosity, but to see it and to hear the extent, the breadth, the depth of his philanthropic activities, it was boggling to the mind. And the question I have, or the reflection point is, was Eric generous because he was successful, or was he successful because he was generous? And my thesis that I'd like to put out there is that actually there's an interrelationship between success and kindness, success and generosity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that success predates acts of generosity. In fact, I would say that a generous spirit, an outward orientation to the world, a general sensitivity to the plight of others is something that actually helps contribute to an overall success in life generally, and that the rewards work both ways. And we'll see this in some of the sources that we're going to look at later. I'm going to stop there for a second before I go to the next slide and just see if anybody would like to comment or reflect on some of these initial sharings that I've given you, and maybe referring to some of the notes that you made in the first minute or two of the session, whether any of these items came up and what reflections you have on them. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, feel free and share some thoughts. Nobody? Did anyone have any of these 4 elements in their list? All right.
I'll just the only thing that's closely connected is humanity, perhaps in terms of just general relationships and kindness, maybe in terms of how you deal with people around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So there's
and
something.
reputation, for me, the main thing is to do with being authentic and being trustworthy. Because I think that creates your reputation as well as who you really are. Reality is key.
Yeah.
For me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Firstly, I love the fact that you brought in the word trust there, Mel. You know, reputation is about trustworthiness. And of course, trust is the glue that makes transactions work. It doesn't matter what's written on a piece of paper, how much is written in a contract, whether it's clause 5 or clause 10, or whether there's an arbitration clause or a this clause or a that clause, or a, you know, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, when we do business with people, when we transact with people, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a business context. When we transact with people, the glue that really makes those transactions stick, that gives us the confidence to transact in the first place, and then be true to that transaction, is trust. And trust underpins one's reputation. And as I say, it's the glue, or it's the grease that makes the wheels turn. Reputation is key. And then I love that other word you used, Mel, is humanity. And I think that's absolutely right, and authenticity. And I think that's where kindness comes in, because a generous spirit, a sensitive spirit, an understanding of the plight of others, you know, generally people like, I mean, once again, to refer to the late Eric Sampson, not only was he an incredibly philanthropic man and an incredibly successful person, but he was also known for his tremendous humility and his humanity. And anybody that dealt with him, anybody that had an experience of dealing with Eric, experienced that humanness, that great sense of humanity, that one was connecting with someone, another human being, you know, not a Goodall, not someone, you know, 100 layers up in the sky, but someone very much down to earth, salt of the earth, and that personal connection. And I have no doubt that in Eric's business dealings, it was exactly that humanity, that sense of being on the level with business partners, with colleagues, with staff, with whoever he dealt with, that was a key contributing factor in his tremendous success that he achieved in his lifetime. Anybody else want to add any thoughts on?
I think, Lance, there are 2 comments in the chat box as well.
Okay, let's have a look at those. Where do I see the chat box? Let me have a look here.
At the bottom, where it says chat.
Oh, okay, yeah, but
maybe you can't if you've got your presentation. I'll read it. So Tracy Ellman says kindness, and Joel Berman wrote pairing up with friends I found essential to get anything done.
Okay, great. And Joel, would you like to share some experiences there? Pairing up with friends, maybe share some experiences?
Yeah, sure. I used to make video games, and I found it took very, very long to get anywhere. And I made a lot of mistakes, and yeah, it just took a long time to make a fun game. But then I paired up with like a friend, and it felt like we got more than twice as much done. And we made like a fun game in much less time, and like helped each other make fewer mistakes.
Okay, so that's a great example. So 1 + 1 didn't only equal 2. It wasn't just that by bringing the 2 of you together, you could achieve twice as much. It was actually by bringing the 2 of you together, you could do 3 or 4. So 1 + 1 equaled 3 or 4 or 5 or 10. And you can imagine the power of that in a network effect, right? If you're talking even beyond just one-on-one friendship. If one leverages the full potential, the capability of one's networks, and particularly if those networks are based on a strong reputation of trust and reliability and confidence, what power can be unleashed. So I think that's a great example, Joel, and it was really great to hear your success in working with a friend and how you kind of couldn't make headway on your own, but just by bringing in somebody else, getting another perspective, bringing two skill sets together, you were able to leverage the combined skill set so much further. So thanks for that great example. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide, and there's the comments. Okay, the next slide is around self-management and development, right? And the 4 points here, the 4 elements. The first one is time, and classically we talk about this as time management, but I want to bring a slightly different perspective on time to this. Although time management is a component of it, I just want to talk about time. I want to talk about seasons. I want to talk about accountability, and I want to talk about a sense of destiny. So if we look at time, I think, particularly when things are stressful, and we all know how difficult these last number of months, this last year has been in many different scenarios, but let's even say in the business scenario. I think it's so easy for one's difficulties, one's challenges, one's thoughts, and even not only in difficult times, even in good times, if you're running with a business and it's tremendously successful and you're putting a lot of time and energy and effort into that, it's so easy for it to become all consuming. And I think one of the key elements of certainly sustainable success is learning to separate out one's time into different components, to compartmentalize. And the word that comes up to mind in Judaism here is Havdalah, right? And Havdalah is this beautiful ceremony we make at the end of Shabbat, on Motzei Shabbat, Saturday nights. And in fact, just to share a personal story, my father and mom live in Johannesburg, and this last year we've hardly seen them. My dad, unfortunately, hasn't been well, and he's been going through some chemotherapy. Thank God he's at the end of that, and please God he'll be well. But one of the things we do very beautifully every Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, is we video call my mom and dad, and we do Havdalah together. And we also do this with Kim's mom, who, although she's in Cape Town, she's also being very careful around health and around COVID. And so we Zoom call her in as well, and we have this sort of Havdalah session, and it's a very, very beautiful time of the week. But what does Havdalah teach us? Havdalah teaches us that we need to make a separation. We need to separate between different aspects of our lives. We need to separate between Shabbat and the rest of the week. And equally, we can apply this concept of separation of Havdalah to our lives. It's not only religious, it's not only about Shabbat and the work week, it's also about our personal lives versus our work lives, making time for exercise, other interests and hobbies, relationships, friendships. All of these things are so important, and particularly when things are stressful, it's really important to make a Havdalah. And I mean this as well in a, not necessarily a religious sense, but certainly in a psychological health sense as well, is to create those sacred spaces wherever they are. If it's once a week, if it's a Friday night dinner with your family, if it's a once a week walk on the mountain to get away, creating those sacred spaces that are separate from the rest of your day-to-day life, separate from your normal existence. I think it's such an important part of self-management in sustaining oneself, particularly in difficult times, but even sustaining oneself for success. A very good friend of mine, running partner of mine, is on the call tonight, Mark Wagenheim. And Mark's going to tell me after this call that I'm not living up to my own words here, because Mark stresses the importance of recovery and of rest as a runner. And he says that recovery is as much a part of training as those tough sessions. And I guess Mark is speaking wisely to this principle of Havdalah, making a separation. you can't set a new personal best on every single run that you run. You've got to take some time out to rest, to recover, to restore, to rejuvenate, to reconnect to your friends, to your family. These are very important aspects of self-management and development. The next one is the concept of seasons. And Judaism has this very, very beautifully, because we have the cycle of the moon and the different phases of the moon. And in fact, our whole calendar is based on the moon. Each month is the beginning of a new moon, an opportunity to reset. We have this wonderful calendar of festivals through the year, which reflect the different seasons of the year, and that there's a different time for different things. There's a time for Pesach, and there's a time for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and they're different times. There's a time for Purim, and there's a time for Tisha B'Av. There's a different time for everything during the year. And even from year to year, there are different seasons. And King Solomon says this very wisely in Ecclesiastics in Kohelet. He says there's a time and a season for everything. A time for peace and a time for war, a time for sowing and a time for reaping. And he goes on and on and on with many, many examples. It's a very beautiful passage in the book of Kohelet. But the basic idea is that we need to tap into the opportunities and have a sensitivity to the moment, to what the season is telling us. And I've had the pleasure over the last 10 years of working with a very dear colleague of mine, our academic dean at the college, Dr. Ashley Smith, who's just retired, in fact, at the age of 72. And Ashley said to me many years ago when I first met him, he said, Lance, you need to seize the opportunity of each age. When you're in your 20s, you're full of energy, but you have no experience. You have no wisdom. When you're in your 30s, maybe you're not as energetic as you were in your 20s, but you start to build experience. You start to build your skills. In your 40s, you've got both energy and wisdom. In your 50s, you're able to give advice and start to mentor others. In your 60s, and so on and so forth. And Ashley said, don't regret the season that it's not. Don't regret the part of your life that has passed. Rather look to the opportunities that are present in the current season of your life and really maximize those opportunities, maximize those potentials. And I really think that those are tremendously wise words from Ashley. And Kohelet says that very, very beautifully. A time and a season for everything. And really seizing the moment and being sensitive to the moment of the season. Accountability is such a big one. Unfortunately, we live in an age, particularly where politicians and business leaders even don't hold themselves accountable or don't consider themselves to be accountable for their decisions, for their actions. And I think personal accountability, having a sense of personal accountability, is something that begins at home. It's not for other people to hold us accountable as the first thing. It's for us to hold ourselves accountable. And I think if you build and instill in yourself a sense of personal accountability, I think this is a wonderful ingredient of success. And then the final point on the slide is destiny. Now, there's a very wonderful book by Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik called Fate and Destiny, From the Holocaust to the State of Israel. And if you haven't read the book, I really highly recommend it for all readers. It's not only a religious treatise. It's really for everybody, and it's not only for Jewish people. I think there would be value in reading that book for everybody.
Lance, what is the name again? I'll put it in the chat for everybody.
It's called Fate and Destiny, From the Holocaust to the State of Israel. It was written in the late 60s, just after the 6-Day War, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's very, very interesting, and it's not just about the Holocaust, and not just about the State of Israel. There's some very wonderful and deep ideas in this book. But what Rav Soloveitchik says in a nutshell, I can't do justice to the full treatise, but what I can say in a nutshell, what he says is that as a Jewish community, as Jewish people, we share a common fate and we share a common destiny. And as individuals, let's forget Jewish community, as individuals, we have fate experiences and we have destiny experiences. What is the difference between the fate experience and the destiny experience? And the key difference between the fate experience and the destiny experience is one of personal empowerment. The fate experience is where things happen beyond our control. We are suddenly thrust about in a world of chaos. Things happen. COVID is a great example. You know, life's going along normally. It was January 2020. We had heard a little bit about this thing in China and what was going on there. Nobody thought at that moment that our worlds were going to be turned upside down, that we would, God forbid, lose the very precious people that we've lost on a personal level, on a communal level, globally, the very special people that have been lost to this terrible disease. None of us would have imagined that the entire world would be turned upside down. That's the fate. That's a classic fate experience, right? It's something that comes at you from left field. You have no control over it, and yet it throws you into complete and utter chaos. Whereas the destiny experience is one where you feel empowered, where you take charge of the situation, where you move from a place of chaos, disruption, dislocation, into a new experience of moving forward, often in spite of the challenges, but moving forward somehow with a sense of empowerment. And what he does very beautifully in the book is he says that people that are locked into a fate experience are people who are constantly asking the question, why did this happen? And we could spend hours, days, years asking ourselves, why did COVID have to happen? Why did this thing have to happen? And it's not only COVID, it's anything. Why did this have to happen? We will never come up with an answer because there is no satisfactory answer, and only God knows. That's the truth. We don't know why COVID had to happen. But when we start to ask the question, what now? In other words, not why did this happen, but given that it has happened, what must I do now? What can I learn? How can I move forward? What opportunities are there in this experience? Then we start to become a partner with God, you could say, or with the universe, or with the general experience of life. We become a partner where we are empowered to start to move forward. And I think this is an outlook, it's an orientation that is so important. And of course, it's very, very difficult for any of us to constantly be in a destiny way of being. You know, we all have personal setbacks, losses, terrible tragedies. And of course, part of grief, part of coming to terms with loss is just experiencing that despair and feeling the sense of being overwhelmed. So certainly I'm not suggesting that we should all walk around, you know, permanently in a state of feeling empowered and on top of things and in control. No, we go through many, many different emotions. But the question is, are we able to move out of despair? Are we able to move away from the why question, which is really a hopeless question and a question that has no answer, to a what now question, which is much more empowering and moves us forward? And I think these are some of the elements: time, seasons, accountability, and destiny, which are very key to self-management and personal development, and critical elements of success in this area. So once again, before I move on to the final pillar, I just wanted to get some thoughts from you guys on these elements and whether anybody had anything to add or share with us on these. Let me put you so I can see you guys again. Anybody want to add to these points or share anything? Jackie, I see you said the book is in the Gitlin Library, so that's great. Pleased about that. Okay, I see many people have switched off their cameras, so hopefully we haven't lost the whole group. I hope that everybody is still there. David, do you want to share something with us?
I think you've touched everything. I haven't gone to sleep and I'm still here listening to you.
Yeah. No,
Right. I hope I'm the David that you were talking. Oh, but David Ginsburg is right. He can no comment. Go, David.
no, I deferred to David Resnick. Over to you, David.
I'm asking both Davids.
No, I've got nothing further to add. I think you're doing a good job so far.
Thanks, David.
Lance, there is a comment from Shelley Friedman.
Okay. Look at that.
Regarding, if you want to read it, or I can read it for you.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it. For me, moving forward with a sense of empowerment and not looking back assisted me to learn and grow and feel that sense of destiny. I identify with that. Thank you, Lance. Okay, thanks, Shelley. That's really beautiful. And I mean, do you feel okay sharing a little bit of that with us, or would you like to just leave it there?
About what you said, because I so identify with it. I, at the moment, would like to leave it there, but one day we'll share it with many people. But thank you for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Beautiful.
sharing that with us. Okay. All right, great. All right, I'm going to move forward because I'm on strict time from Lisa and Brenna. They told me 7 o'clock. It's lights out. So I've got a few more minutes with you guys and another 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to have to wrap up. So I want to share with you the final section, and then I'll just show you some of the sources a little bit and the overall framework, and then we can wrap up for tonight. What I will do is circulate these slides to you in a PDF format so you can work through them yourself, because you'll see in some of the other slides, there's quite a little bit of granular detail with quotes from Pirkei Avot or from various Jewish sources that I think you will enjoy and find value in. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the final pillar, our spiritual self. So it's not our self in necessarily a physical, psychological sense. It's our relationship to that which lies outside of ourselves. Okay, and everybody here on this call may have a different understanding of what that is. To me, as a more observant Jew, for me it is about my relationship to God, and that's how I relate to this element. So for me, I can see very clearly these three relational aspects: my relationship to God, my relationship with myself and self-work, and my relationship to other people. But for you, it may be different. You may have a different way of understanding or connecting to this element. But nonetheless, I think every human being has a sense that they are part of something bigger, and that there are forces at play that are beyond their control. And the question is, how does one relate? How does one find an ability to move forward in the world and to be successful in the world and to function in the context of this infinite universe? And even scientifically, we know that the universe is expanding, which means that there's something outside of the universe, right? What's the universe expanding into? So we're talking about something way beyond our comprehension on a physical level. We have some way of relating to that, particularly if we're going to be successful in our lives. We have to find some way of relating to this metaphysical aspect. And there are four elements of this pillar that I'd like to talk to a little bit in this last section of the talk tonight. And these are them. The four are living with a sense of purpose, living with a sense of a higher truth, living with gratitude, and living with faith. And I think these four elements are really reflective of a particular worldview. And I do believe that that this worldview, or these elements of a worldview, are very, very critical to success. And as I said, success not necessarily defined by money or achievements, but a successful experience of one's life. And the first one is purpose. I think, so important to getting up in the morning, feeling challenged, feeling motivated, feeling a sense that life is worth living, is finding one's purpose. And Simon Sinek speaks to this as well in a business context. He says that so much about successful businesses is around finding the why. And I don't mean the why that we were talking about earlier, the why question, why does this happen, or why did this have to be? I'm talking about the why as in, why do we exist? What is it that I have special to contribute? Why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing? And having a sense of that why, answering that question why, before one gets into the what and the how, is very important, not only at a business level, but on a personal level. And unfortunately, in today's times, and I'm not talking specifically COVID here, I'm talking about the world that we live in, which often has a very high emphasis on money and commercial success. And there's a great deal of competitiveness and jealousy and angst and greed, that so often people are driven by the wrong things and find themselves involved in activities that don't really speak to their personal why. And I would like to suggest that if you look at your unique skills and qualities and talents, and you link those to making the world a better place, you will find your personal sense of why. And I can say, I remember many, many years ago, I was involved in investment banking. Lisa spoke about my involvement in financial services. I have to say, financial services was one of the least fulfilling parts of my career. And it's really been in the last 10 years with my involvement in SACAP and in community that I've really started to live a life of purpose. I remember when I was involved with a particular financial institution, phoning my sister in Australia and saying, you know, Donnie, there's no enjoyment to what I'm doing. You know, I'm just going through the mold. Yes, I've been successful. You know, yes, you know, my career's going in the right direction. But there's no joy in this. There's no sense of meaning in what I'm doing. And her advice to me at the time, which I would say was not the right advice, was that, you know, Lance, she told me the Havdalah story. She said, you know, work is about work and meaning is found elsewhere. And I would like to say that that's not correct. Although there's an element of truth to that we can't necessarily always find huge meaning and purpose in every single thing we do. It's important that we spend most of our lives connecting our talents and our skills and experience to making the world a better place, and somehow finding that connection between what we do day to day and how we leverage our skills and talents and experience to making the world a better place. And I think this is a key aspect of successful living. Truth is around truth telling, you know, telling the truth to oneself and accepting that as much as there's an internal truth, there's also an absolute truth that's higher, and also making sure one gets feedback, because we have a tendency as human beings to lie to ourselves, to comfort ourselves by telling lies to ourselves. So important, particularly in times of challenge and difficulty, to get to the truth and to make those tough decisions and to you know, see things for what they are and accept that it's time for change. It's time to move on. It's time to take corrective action. And I'm not suggesting a slash and burn approach to life at all. Of course, one has to be very careful and considered and sensitive in these things. But it is important to face up to the truth, because when one faces up to the truth, you can move forward and you can make decisions and move to a better place. So I think truth is a critical element. Gratitude, I think gratitude is part of a worldview. It goes together with the kindness element. And, you know, for me, every single day when I dive in, I focus on gratitude. And, you know, gratitude is that magic reset button, right? You've had a fight with your spouse or with your child or with your business partner. try reflecting for a moment and feeling gratitude for that person. You'll be amazed at the impact it can have in repairing the relationship. Of course, there's work to be done in the relationship itself, but just shifting to a place of gratitude is an incredibly cathartic process that helps build relationships and helps give one a sense of one's blessings, and therefore a sense of wanting to share those blessings with the world in a positive way. And then finally, and I'm going to end here with, as the final point, is faith. And Stephen Covey puts this brilliantly in his book on 7 habits. It's so important to understand the difference between the things you can control, the things you can influence, and the things that you may be concerned about, but which you have no control or influence over. And you know, sometimes there are just forces that are greater than one is able to understand. From my personal experience, 16 years ago, we had a beautiful baby boy born to us, Sasha. 2 years prior to that, in moments of despair, I didn't think that my wife would survive the pregnancy-related illness that she had. I wasn't sure my daughter would survive because there were certain conditions that she may have related to my wife's, and I thought that the world was at its end. But we can't always see the cloth or the beautiful tapestry from the front side. Sometimes our experience of life, we see the tapestry from the back, and we can't always appreciate the beautiful design that lies on the other side. But sometimes in those darkest places, in the night, we need the light of the morning to appreciate the blessing of the dark night and what may come from it. And I think just having a sense of faith, having a sense that, as the Israelis say, "Yeh beseder," it'll be okay. I think there's something to be said for that, and it's part of a worldview that, together with purpose, truth, and gratitude, helps one be a person in the world where there's a great deal beyond ourselves, but nonetheless an ability to make of ourselves a greatness, to achieve success, to find happiness and joy in our lives. So I'm gonna end there. I just want to quickly, before we close, just show you some of these other slides, which we don't have time to go through now. But each of these elements, I've put some sources and some comments and reflection points on them. And feel free to use these and to add your own. I've done it for each of the three elements. So you can see how that is all set out. And then finally, that's the overall framework. The world stands on 3 things: kind deeds, Torah, and service of God, our interpersonal relationships, our work on ourselves, and our relationship to the metaphysical, the spiritual, that beyond ourselves. And in each of those 4 elements that we can focus on towards successful living. And yeah, as I said, these aren't necessarily the 12. They're the 12 that I came up with in preparing for tonight's talk, and I hope you found it useful in sharing. Would anybody like to say some last minute things or share any last minute thoughts?
Lance, I just wanted to say that just a big thank you to you for your magnificent, inspiring words, and just was a real privilege to hear you put such complex issues so succinctly, and just really at a time when we all need things to be simplified and the messages of life to be simplified. So thank you on behalf of ORT. I know you are an extremely busy guy, about to become even busier with your bigger community role, but just we really thank you for your time. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us that our community is really blessed to have you and someone with your insights and emotional intelligence taking up this role in our community to lead us all. So thank you. And I don't know if anybody else has got anything to add, but if not, that brings us to an end for tonight.
Okay, terrific. I will send the slides, and if anybody wants to write to me or engage with me personally, I'm more than happy to have a chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is a huge topic, so unfortunately an hour doesn't really do justice to the full topic, but I hope you guys got some value out of it. And Brenna, thanks for those kind words, and thanks again to ORT for organizing these talks and for inviting me to be part of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Lance. Good
Thank you
night,
so much,
everybody, and we
Lance.
look forward to seeing you at our next ORT webinar.
Okay, cool. God bless.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.